Okay, we're live.
Great.
I'm just trying to get David Felton in.
Okey doke. Looks like he's there. Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Let me apologize up front. It's a bit noisy where I am, but I will go on mute relatively soon. It's Wednesday, May 15th. It's a little after 6. This is a Weston Board of Education special meeting, which is being held remotely. We have a quorum. If we can recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to turn the meeting over just briefly to Lisa Barberio. She'll outline what this evening is, how we're going to follow this evening's agenda. I think everyone knows this is a discussion from Tecton, the consultant that we've engaged for studying the possible addition or possible renovation for the middle school. But Lisa, why don't you go from here and then we'll take public comment.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. So the purpose of this meeting is to initiate the process regarding the Weston Middle School project, which I was charged to do by the Board of Education. There is a clear sequence to this work that I would like to articulate so that both the Board of Education and the Weston residents have a clear understanding of this process. Tonight, we will hear from the public. Tecton will present the project. Thank you, Jeff and Antonia, for being with us again. The Board of Ed members will have an opportunity to ask questions. At the regular meeting of the Board of Ed on Monday, the public will have another opportunity to share comments. At this meeting, there will be a vote to recommend that the Board of Selectmen move this project forward. If the Board of Education does not pass that motion, the project is paused. If that motion passes, then the project moves on to the Board of Selectmen, who must work collaboratively with the Board of Finance. The ultimate decision regarding moving this project forward and submitting the grant to the state by June 30th of 2024 is the function of the Board of Selectmen and not the Board of Education. The Board of Selectmen must pass specific resolutions for a referendum on the project appropriation, for the authorization of the superintendent to apply for the grant, for the establishment of a building committee specific to the project, and for the preparation of schematic drawings. If these resolutions are not passed by the Board of Selectmen, the project is paused for another year or stopped. If these resolutions pass, it will then be determined by the voters of Weston in the fall whether this project moves forward. I'd like to say that I understand the complexity of these decisions, and I respect all the stakeholders' thoughts and comments. Ultimately, it is the town of Weston and Weston's voters that will decide the future of this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So let's go to agenda item number 3, which is public comment. And I'd like to just read a statement that we read ahead of public comment at every meeting. The board welcomes the opportunity to hear from members of the public about matters concerning Weston Public Schools. Public comment. Public comment is an important chance for the board to receive input and feedback from our school community. We listen attentively to all comments shared. While we value and pay close attention to public comment, it's our practice not to respond substantially or sometimes at all during public comment. There are several reasons for this. First, engaging in a discussion on non-agenda items could violate the board's obligation to comply with the Freedom of Information Act. Second, the board or the administration may not be prepared. Excuse me. I just lost that. Peter, if you have that in front of you, will you finish that while I get back to it?
And where did you leave off again? Third?
Just one second. I'm sorry. Third,
I can
I got it. Third, the board develops its meeting agenda carefully to ensure that the board addresses matters that are pressing or relevant at the time of the meeting. We encourage members of the public with specific questions, concerns, or complaints about our schools to reach out directly to Superintendent Barbario and the Board of Education at westportps.org. Please familiarize yourself with the bylaws of the policy 9325 meeting conduct, which states 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 20 minutes on each subject matter. Additional details on public comment at board meetings can be found on our website, as well as the meeting conduct bylaws 9325. With that, Lisa, would you like, or Peter, would you like to take?
I'll take it from here. Thank you. So we've had introductory remarks of a comprehensive and serious nature. We've read our policy. And the rub tonight is that this is a special meeting of a single subject matter. So I see there's 44 participants. We have the administration, the staff, members of the public, the Board of Ed, and we have a limited time for public comment because of the written policy. So I thought about this today. Where do I take off from here, right? It landed in my lap to sort of manage 20 minutes. And Jody and I worked out a little system. And I just going to indulge you for a second because our town is going through some tense moments and I want to have a little levity. Let me give you a story and then we'll go to public comment and take a minute. So I was at JFK Terminal 5 the other day, waiting for my JetBlue flight, gate 20 to San Diego. You know how it works, right? I got my little computer, I got my little rolly. And just before boarding, everyone starts creeping up, right? And you're looking around, everybody's looking to get that first in line, right? They're going to rush on board. And it's frustrating, right? Because there's lots of people and you can only have so many groups enter at a time. So with Jody and I, and with my sort of urging, said, you know what? It's going to be really hard to get everyone satisfied to get 20 minutes of the public comment, particularly if it's 5 minutes apiece. So I'm going to extend my analogy and it's a little levity. Okay. So bear with me, but I think it's useful to have maybe a little laugh before we get into more serious matters. So first and foremost, I want to welcome you to Board of Engineering Flight 515. We are overbooked tonight, but the good news is there's many flights after this. So everyone's going to get a seat. Because we're overbooked also, we're going to board by comment groupings. And just like when we board JetBlue, we have to inform everyone if you're bringing oversized comments, they may not fit in the overhead bin and they may be gate checked. So, you know, let's kind of limit it to 5 minutes, but even to let more people board, let's limit it to less if we could. Then I'm like, all right, here I am. And I don't have a lot of happy customers, so I got to remind them that unruly customers will be denied boarding and maybe go to a no-fly zone, right? We want nice civil customers on our Board of Ed Flight 515 flight. So I'm going to call public comment by groups, and we're just going to see how this works out. And then Jody will advance you if you fit into that one group. So the first group to board public comment tonight will be parents with little kids. We call that mid service. So if you're a parent with a little kid or kids in the school district, we invite you to be the first to public comment. So Jody, is anyone raising their hand who meets that criteria for public comment tonight?
This is insanity. How do you define little kid? Kid that's
Just-
pretty high or a third grader?
I think we should just, I think maybe we have several people already now that have raised
All
their.
right, so let's pick one or two, and
I think we should
they're
just go with
parents
the
with small
individuals
children.
who raise their
There are
hand.
mint passengers because I have to. It landed in my lap. I have to figure this out. So this is my method tonight. Let's just have a smile and let a few of our parents speak first. So Jody, you want to advance someone?
I have two individuals who have raised their hands now, both of whom have had their hands up for a while.
Beautiful. So let's choose.
When
both of
I
them.
call your name, I will promote you to a panelist. Once you get promoted to a panelist, please turn on your video monitor. I request that you state your name and state the address, your street address, and then you will have 5 minutes to speak. The first individual that had their hand up was Ellen Kraft. So Ellen, I am going to promote you to a panelist now, and then you will have 5 minutes to speak. Just give me one moment to promote you. Okay, Ellen, if you could turn on your camera, state your name and state your address, and then I will start the timer for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jody. And
You're
thanks,
welcome.
everyone. Members of the EOC Board of Education and Weston community members. I'm a parent of a second grader. I think that's a little kid. And I currently serve as the Board of Education rep on the Hurlbut Executive PTO Board and will be volunteering in the same role next year on the WIS Executive PTO Board. My husband, Trevor, and I are parents that are deeply invested in the well-being and the education of our child and the children of our community. We stand in full support of exploring the option of building a new middle school within our district. Weston's middle school age children deserve a learning environment that not only meets basic safety standards, but also nurtures their mental health, promotes wellness, and fosters emotional connection in this critical time in their young lives. The current state of the middle school building, I think we all can agree, is simply unacceptable. In fact, it's shocking. It fails to provide the necessary safety measures, lacks proper ventilation, and is riddled with structural issues that compromise the well-being of our students and staff. From inadequate emergency systems to outdated facilities, it's clear our children deserve better. Renovating the old building, as some may suggest, could lead to numerous issues and potential displacement of students. The cost and logistical challenges associated would likely disrupt the learning environment and pose safety concerns for our children. But after attending multiple FOC meetings and EOC meetings over the past 3 years, I also understand that it may be best to come up with another solution that the constituency of Weston can agree to. But something must be done, and done now. It's essential that we explore every option of providing our middle school students a safe and purpose-built facility that meets the needs of 21st century education. To do this, the BOE and EOC must continue to move forward in creating the grant application for the state of Connecticut to help fund the construction or refurbishment of the middle school. By leveraging state resources, we can alleviate the financial burden on our local community while ensuring that our children have access to a safe and modern learning environment. Investing in Weston Middle School is not just a matter of infrastructure, but a statement of our commitment to the future of our community. And I'm asking all members of this Board of Education to not delay this for another year or years. By providing our children with a modern, safe, and supportive learning environment, we're laying the foundation for their success and well-being, just like our neighbors in Westport and Wilton. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to talk and for us in the community to be involved, especially parents, in the decision-making process. We really appreciate being heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jody, you have a second?
Thank you very much, Ellen. I'm just going to move you back to a panelist, and then I will promote somebody else. The next individual that had their hand up was Ruth. Ruth, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. When you come on, please turn your camera on, state your full name and your street address. Okay, Ruth, you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ruth Israeli. I live at 11 Nordholm Drive. I want to thank the Board of Education members for hearing us tonight and also for putting parents of young children first because I'm on my way home from work and I have to go do bedtime and dinner. I think it's incredibly important for the community to be able to have the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen move forward with this project. The project signing on to this exploration of the options for a new middle school building is essential to ever getting to the end of the project. If we don't start this process soon and we wait another year, it is another year that our children will have lost in terms of having an education that is comparable to the surrounding towns, maintaining our rankings as a school in the state of Connecticut, And additionally, I think I have a little bit of insight that I can share because I attended Weston Middle School. And I can tell you that not much has changed except for the library furniture is a little bit different. And the watermarks on the ceiling tiles have now just become holes with exposed wires. I am not thrilled about the idea that my children will be attending a school in the same building that I went to, which wasn't in great condition when I went there. And the thought that our schools that function as a learning community, all four schools function together. Our students, even in high school, go back to the middle school for events. Elementary schoolers go to swim classes at the middle school. And so the middle school is a beating part of the heart of this town. And if it is in disrepair, the entire school community is not functioning. I think it's incredibly important that people understand that this is voting to proceed with this project is not voting to fund this project over other projects or exactly as, voting to fund the project exactly as it's stated or proposed, but rather moving forward with this project is allowing the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen and the citizens of the town to learn more about what is being proposed so that we can make a decision. And for that reason, I am asking this board and the Board of Selectmen to push forward so that we can move forward as a town.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. I will move you back to an attendee. Just give me one moment.
So continuing with my theme, the next public comment group to board would be, for example, PTO parent, a Girl Scout, a Boy Scout, troop leader, someone that spends a lot of time in the school as a parent. We've heard from one PTO member. If there's a second, that'd be great. If not, we can board a different group. So is there anyone that's a PTO member or heads a particular school that wishes to speak now?
I do have somebody who has had her hand raised for a few minutes. Pardon me if I am mispronouncing your name, Ms. Williams. Janae Williams. I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Give me just one moment. Ms. Williams is coming on as a panelist. And Ms. Williams, now that you're here, would you mind taking your, showing your camera and stating your full name and your street address? You'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I am Janae Williams. I live at 146 Old Pine Road, and I am a parent of a third grader. I have stopped debating whether she is little or not. Sadly, she's not little enough to ever benefit from what we're discussing tonight, because this building, even if we start now, won't be done in time for her to attend. So I say that with sadness. But I want to make it very clear to everyone in this whole meeting, everyone in this town, I am in favor of moving forward with this proposal. I am adamantly opposed to any option that involves further delay. It's already too late for my daughter, and that, as I said, makes me very sad. So I also want to speak as one of the, I think, 30% of families that moved in during COVID. I moved in 2020. I moved here from the schools. Both my husband and I are originally from the state of Connecticut. I went through Greenwich Public Schools. He went through Stratford. We moved here because we thought we were moving to a town that shared our values in terms of our children's education and their safety. And I say that because I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of people make arguments about why we can no longer afford to delay and we no longer should delay. But I want to make sure that you understand that what is at stake here are safety issues. I looked at the code violations list in terms of fire alarms, egress, signage, ADA issues. I have had the unfortunate experience of being in one of the bathrooms as a woman who is 5'10", seeing over, sitting under this stall and wondering what that experience would have been like when I was in 6th grade. I don't want my daughter going through that. I don't want any child in this town going through that. And so to the extent that budgets are a statement of our values, what I am saying is please invest in our children. Let's go move forward with this building. Whatever we will do, let's not delay a second longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. I am going to move you back to an attendee from panelist mode.
So how are we doing on time, Jody, for our boarding?
One
We
second.
have time for one more? So
I
let's
have-
do it.
Just give me one more moment. People have not been taking up their full 5 minutes, so we do have time left.
All right, so let's move to from Mosaic to.
Excuse me, I just want a clarification. How much time do we have left, Jody? Because I want to make sure we have time for everyone. 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
We've only had people speaking for about 7 minutes now, so
All
we
right,
have
thank you.
Well, that's good.
time.
So let's following our
Is there
journey
any,
here. Is there any more PTO moms or dads that want to speak? And then we'll move to boarding group A if not.
I have another individual who has raised his hand. Mr. Worrell, give me one moment. I'm going to.
He's not boarding right now. We're boarding into Mosaic, but I will board group B soon. So is there anyone else?
Wait,
that's
Peter,
parent?
that is ridiculous. He
David,
has
please
young
be quiet.
kids. He has
Please be
young
quiet.
kids.
Yes, but I have time for him later in boarding group A. So do we have anyone that's a parent with a small kid or small child or children or a PTO member?
I do not have anybody else who has raised their hand right now.
Lovely. So we'll move to boarding group A, and the offer for boarding group A calling out as an RTC member, or particularly RTC leadership. And the reason I asked this is because I did talk to Kirby and Roan this week, and I said, why don't you guys write a memo? And that's your white paper, your position paper on the school long-term plan. And maybe someone from the RTC did craft that. But if not, group A can include an RTC member for even and balanced input. So why don't we allow an RTC member to speak now?
With all
believe
due
Travis-
respect, I don't have that information.
I believe Travis is a member of the RTC, so if he'd like to speak, we should let him speak.
Travis,
Yes,
I'm going to promote
please.
you to a panelist now. Mr. Worrell, you have been promoted to a panelist. If you wouldn't mind turning on your camera and please state your street address, and then you will have 5 minutes to speak.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my video to work and I can't. My phone is stuck in safe driving mode. I'm not driving.
As long as you have your boarding pass, you're good.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me, everybody?
speak. Yes, please speak, Mr. Worrell. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I appreciate everyone's hard work on this project. Thank you very much for your time. I'm speaking as myself, Travis Worrell, right now. I don't think you should have to categorize someone who's speaking here. If you talked to me beforehand, you would have known how I was speaking, but you don't. So I'm not speaking for the RTC's behalf, as I did not go over with them anything on the meeting. So everything I'm saying is all personal. I have 3 kids in the school system right now, currently, one who will not benefit at all from this and will most likely be displaced. All the kids in that age range that will be displaced went through a horrible time during COVID and have already experienced that. And I don't think these are the kids that you should be doing that to. It'll be 2 times in their life that they're going to run through this situation. I think it was detrimental on mental health, all health, it was detrimental to. And we're going to run through the same situation with them not having a full school building to learn in. In 2017, the school study said that over the 3 other schools needed $30 million in maintenance. I'd like to discuss, or even I'd like the FOC to discuss how that's going to be paid, because it can't be kicked down the road anymore. And that's the reason that we have the condition we do at the middle school. I think that we could renovate the middle school, not displace kids from swimming for that many years. I'm not sure where they were going to plan on sending those kids to a different town, maybe. They could renovate the whole school in chunks and have no or minimal impact to the kids. We're only using 64% of the occupancy of our schools with the drop in enrollment in recent years. We have plenty of room to move kids out of half of the middle school into other schools or other classes, or even change a grade into another school. It's not rocket science. We have to be creative. We're getting into times of serious inflation. I'm not anti-progress. There's just the right way to do things. And I believe that this is the wrong way. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Mr. Worrell. I'm going to move you back to an attendee. Just give me a moment. Okay. I have two other individuals who have raised their hand. The next one that was waiting is Edith. Edith, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Edith, you're now a panelist. If you wouldn't mind turning on your camera and state your
there I
name
am.
and your street address. Thank you.
Sure. Edith Ratina, 21 Lakeside Drive, West. Actually, I have questions, not, obviously I have 3 children that are in the Weston school system. I am part of the PTO. The reason why I didn't raise my hand earlier is because I don't feel like I know enough about the options. So what I wanted to ask, as someone who has little kids, and it's hard for me to follow all the finance discussions. Like, it's easy for me to say, okay, Board of Ed, budget, done. I'm able to read that, understand. It's pretty quick. I've also been on the meeting, so, that was an easy thing for me to understand. When it comes to construction, I guess what I'm not clear on, for example, what Travis said, which is, fixing it in parts, and versus, shutting down the school. And then my other question is, where would the kids go? Now, these are things that have probably been discussed on many meetings. But given that this is my first time coming on, I am a member of the PTO to be able to speak to people who don't have time to be on the Zoom meetings. I happen to be here today, and I was wondering if anyone could just quick sum, okay, I understand one plan is to completely redo it. Have we discussed why can't do it in parts? And to Travis's point, what will happen to, for example, the swimmers? What will happen to the kids who are going to be in middle school during this renovation, which will 100% be one or more of my children? And so I guess that's just, I know this is a question and not a statement. Obviously, we all want the best for our kids. I just have questions in terms of how this is going to affect my kids. And I know that people have said, hey, we can't wait any longer. I've only been here since 2020, but obviously I want the best for our kids. I guess I just don't understand how long this has been discussed, and then what has been done in terms of evaluations for the project. And if there's been any okay, this obviously there's lots of things wrong. Obviously the building needs to be fixed. But I guess my question is, can we speak to what's the pros and cons of each one? And I'm sure these have been discussed, but if you could just kind of give me a very cliff notes of what it is so I can start following for real, I guess is my question.
Thank you for your questions, Edith. And typically we don't go back and forth, but actually what follows this evening, if you can hang in there in your car, addresses exactly the questions you asked in a very concise way. The Tecton folks are pros at this, and we've gone through it, and they have a perfect presentation for you to answer the questions you have. So great lead questions. How are we doing on time, Jody?
We've gone through approximately 13 minutes, so we still do have time for other individuals if they would like to speak. Edith, I'm going to move you back to an attendee.
So please roll your rollie up to the gate and board, because we have 7 minutes and we'll take a couple more talks.
I have 2 other individuals who've been waiting. Martin Moabir, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Just give me one moment. Mr. Moabir, now that you're a panelist, would you mind turning on your video camera and please state your address? Thank you, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Martin Mohabir, 10 Hyde Ridge Road. First of all, I want to ingest whatever Vice Chair Gordon had for lunch today so I can take flight. That's my humor, Peter. As one resident said earlier, all four schools function together. I don't think you can focus on one school without factoring in the cost of renovating the other schools. So very quickly, I simply hope that there is attention to the totality of upgrading and modeling such costs for all schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Jody, maybe we have one more and we could elevate.
Yes. Pardon the dog, just one moment. I'm going to move you back to an attendee, just one moment. And I do have somebody else waiting. Stephanie Feingold, you've had your hand raised. I'm going to promote you to a panelist. And Stephanie, you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Feingold. I live at 3 Pink Cloud Lane. I have 3 children in the school system. My oldest is in 8th grade at the middle school. My middle is in 5th grade, so we'll be joining the middle school next year. And my youngest is in 3rd grade and, will be in the middle school, but sadly not a new one. I also am deeply involved in the PTO. I have served on the executive boards of all the PTOs my children have been in since the day I moved here, which was in November 2020, and had the privilege of serving as Pearl Butt's PTO president last year, and I will be WIS's PTO president next year, as well as serving on the middle school executive board. So I share all that in my PTO resume, just to suggest that I spent a lot of time in the schools and I spent a lot of time with the kids in the schools. And also I am part of the, new population that has moved to Weston. And so I see the perspective of everything that is occurring in terms of energy and interest and priorities with that lens. I remember that the first meeting I actually attended on Zoom when I moved here in November 2020 was an optimization meeting discussing the middle school. And it was so thrilling because we had moved to this town where the world was on pause, and yet the town felt like it was not. It felt like it was still forward looking instead of being paralyzed by, the pause that the rest of the world was feeling. And yet now I feel 3 years plus later, we're still in the same place that we were. And I am sympathetic to the concerns that parents have about, well, how will this affect my child if they are displaced? And I am sympathetic to concerns about where will they swim. However, being tuned into as much as possible what the plans are, and understanding that the children actually will not be displaced if the renovate as new is adopted, and knowing how thoughtful this committee has been on every single possible detail as it relates to the finances, as it relates to the kids' individual educational experiences, and most importantly, as it relates to the future of our town. I feel really strongly that Weston is our schools. People do not move here for the retail. And I don't even think people really move here, the young families, for the 2-acre zoning, even though that's an appeal. People move here because of the community and because the people here care about the education our kids have. And I can tell you, coming from New York City, where my kids were in classes of, beyond 30 with one teacher, in buildings that were as old as time, feeling like I was in a place where the town and the leadership and the principals and the residents cared about what is really the beating heart of Weston, made me feel like I really landed in the right place. And every time I take my kids to see a show at Bedford Middle School, my heart breaks a little bit, because my kids think, like, why aren't we going to middle school here? And I explain, well, you have magical teachers and you're having incredible experience and all these other things. But deep inside my heart, I wish that they had a school whose aesthetics and whose function and whose safety and all the other things that go into the infrastructure of the school matched the phenomenal leadership and the caliber of education that I know that they're receiving inside. So I just want to say that there is no good time. There's no good time to undertake this project, but I don't think delaying makes that time any better. And from what I understand, the cost of the project has already almost doubled, because 20 years ago, none of these problems were addressed. And every year that we wait, the cost of it always goes up. And it's important to care about where our taxes go. But if I was to put any money down, it would be on the schools.
I'm sorry, you've reached your 5-minute mark. Thank you.
And that is it. And I just want to close by thanking all of you for your time and effort. It is appreciated by all of us.
Thank you for your
I'm
comments.
going to move you back to an attendee. Just give me one moment.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Peter, shall we move on to the presentation?
Yeah, the gate is closed, so we'll put the flight in the safe hands of pilot Jeff and co-pilot Antonia, and they'll take off from here.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Wazinski. I'm principal at Tecton Architects. Antonia, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Antonia Ciavarella, and I am an architectural designer at Tecton Architects.
All right, so I am working to get a presentation up on your screen. You should see at this point a blue title slide. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Full screen.
Fantastic. All right, well, great. Thank you. All right, so we have a brief summary presentation outlining the several different items. First, we want to talk about the overall project, the scope, talk about our work in progress, talk about the current direction that we're headed, speak to a component of the grant application called the educational specifications. Antonia will go over that in a bit more detail, and then talk a little bit about schedule and next steps. So on project overview, and I'm going to see if I can use my pointer here. This slide represents our current direction. So after many, many meetings, working with the district leadership, faculty, staff, working group meetings, it was decided to look at a grant application for a all-new build, a new middle school. And this slide represents some of the statistical information that is rooted in that plan. So on the left side of the screen, you see the original construction, average age basically of 64 years old. The current grade configuration is 6 to 8 as it stands today. The current enrollment is 519 students. And part of the grant application, what you're looking for is to, they want to see an 8 to 10 year window of forecast and student enrollment projection. So that's been done. The district does it every year, and the updated future enrollment projections, the highest projection is shown in year 2033-34 at 574 pupils, right, for a 6 to 8. The reason why this is important is because the grant application is tied specifically to a square foot per student. And when you plug the 574 students into the grade range, what the state tells you that they'll reimburse is a measurable area of about 97,000 square feet. When you add things like wall thicknesses and chases and things like that, the building that you can build that's entirely that can be reimbursed by the state at your reimbursement percentage is about 104,000 square feet. So this number is critically important. The other statistical information that you want to pay attention to is the existing area of the building, right? So there's a couple details here. The middle school itself, and we separated it, and for those that have followed along over the last 3 years, we looked at a lot of different options, studying how we could kind of renovate, modify, and kind of separate out the gym area and the pool, the area affectionately called the new gym and pool. So that area itself is about 26,000 square feet, and then the rest of the middle school proper is 135. So in total, your existing square footage as it stands out there today is 161,000. And I think there was a gentleman that spoke to that there's more space than needed. And that is true. So for the 574 students, you really only need about 104,000 square foot building. So our plan is to build an all new building and preserve and separate out the gym pool building, that 26,000 square feet, for future community use. It'll be separated, utilities will be separated, and it'll be a standalone functioning building. This slide represents an aerial map, right? So north is on the top of your screen, Revson Field along the top. The white outline, dark shaded area is the footprint of the existing middle school. And what this diagram is illustrating that we could preserve that gym and pool area, the new gym and pool area, as a freestanding standalone building, and likely build a new 2-story building of that 104,000 square feet in this general location, in that darker blue area shown highlighted there. What's nice about this, and we'll get into a slide where we had a lot of lively conversations about, renovate as new versus new and the benefits and challenges of each. What's nice about the planning, and again, this is very high level conceptual. There certainly will be many, many more studies from a design perspective and layout perspective, but big picture, the idea is to limit the disruption to the existing occupants of the building in the middle school while you build a new building. And that's an important piece in the overall plan. So just want to speak to the various different components of the grant application. So the grant application every year is due June 30th, right? So there's a variety of different checklist items. It's all done online. It's an electronic grant application. There's probably about 3 dozen items that you need to collect. This slide, I just really want to highlight some of the major elements, and the superintendent eloquently spoke to the resolutions that the Board of Selectmen is going to need to take, and the resolution from the Board of Education, which is really approving the educational specifications. And the educational specifications, think of it as like a guidebook, right? It's everything that you want in your new middle school, from educational pedagogy to programming to spaces, the type of spaces, everything that you want this school to be, you put into the educational specification, because the state's going to look at that spec, that 200-page document, as a way to look at it and make sure that anything that you put in your building is going to be a reimbursable expense. So it's a critically important piece to the grant application. There's several other items, things like looking at the environmental conditions, like it's called the phase 1. So all of these other activities are ongoing, making sure that we're comprehensive with our grant application. So some of that work in progress, I mentioned the ed specs, and Antonio will give you a little bit more detail on that. The phase 1 due diligence, which is having environmental engineers walk the building in site, looking for areas of environmental and hazard materials concerns. Obviously, there's a long history with the existing middle school, so it's been well documented. The reason why these pieces are important to the grant application is because they do have cost implications, right? Time implications, cost implications, and the state wants to know that you're doing your due diligence as you submit the grant application. And of course, one of the last pieces to the overall grant application is submitting what's called a uniform cost estimate, making sure that you're validating costs against today's current markets for a new middle school. So the piece on this slide, the main takeaway on this slide is down at the bottom. So the various different colors are basically a summary of all the programmatic space in your building. So, you know, typical classrooms are in the blue, administration offices in the purple, and the square footage is all shown here on the right. The reason why we look at this in great detail is because we want to make sure when we have those conversations about all the program elements that you want in your building in this progressive 21st century middle school, we add all those up, and then we add things like, you know, circulation corridors and paths and toilets and things like that. We want to make sure your building is at or below that maximum allowable area to make sure that you're getting reimbursed for every square foot that you build. So Antonia, I'm going to turn this over to you to speak to a little bit about the educational components in the school.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So it's so wonderful to be preaching to the choir, so to speak, because we know that this is a critical component for the Board of Education, and we've heard it's critical to the community. And why it matters is the students, right? Our children in the schools. We know that we spend 90% of our time indoors, and there's evidence-based research that supports a 25% improvement over a baseline when you design buildings that support student health and wellness. If you start with student health, you can impact student thinking and ultimately student performance. And we've seen that these progressive learning environments are increasingly comprehensive, from breakout spaces and collaboration zones with those small groups, rooms nearby, to reconfigurable, flexible furniture in classrooms, the ability to break out with the incorporation of technology and natural daylight infused, and critically important are both the connections to nature and this element of personalization to really foster that sense of belonging that makes students feel warm and welcome, especially at that middle school age. Some more of that evidence-based research is here, and this is, even though we're at this high-level master planning approach, we're taking a look at this data and making sure that it's incorporated into the planning process, the educational specifications, because we know it has significant impacts on learning potentials. So even at this early stage, we're hyper-focused on a research-based approach. Things like natural daylight, fresh air, again, that sense of belonging. There are architectural and building systems components that we can specify now that have dramatic impacts.
Great, thank you, Antonia. Okay, so the current direction, I think it was Edith that spoke to kind of understanding in a very high level the journey that we've been on over the last 3 years, and understanding the challenges in comparison of renovate as new versus new. So this slide in very basic summary form does that. So let me just set up the categories. So to compare renovations, you know, phased occupied renovations of an existing middle school, which is a column shown here, to new construction, there's several different categories that we want to consider, right? And obviously this has been greatly simplified to a, you know, a red, yellow, and green kind of prioritization. But obviously red is bad, yellow is fair, and green is good, right? So, but there's very real, tangible data analytics behind this summary slide. So first of which is duration and disruption, right? And we heard it, right? Students have been through a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, right? And the impact socially, emotionally on them, we want to be sensitive to that as we plan projects like this. And believe me, this is top of mind for many, many of our clients. So duration and disruption is key when you're looking at renovate as new versus new. Just a simple fact, right? A new building of that size is probably going to take anywhere from 18 to 20 months A phased renovation of your existing middle school is going to take twice as long. So just remember that when you're going through. So simply put, the duration and disruption is dramatically different between one and the other. Of course, in some instances, you may be paying a little bit more for new, but what is the value? What is the value to the students, the occupants? What's the value to the community? So those are the conversations we had. Obviously, we can achieve 21st century space, flexible, agile, adaptable space in either project, right? In either project type, because you're completely reinventing and renovating as new, and same thing with new. We think you can achieve similar fashion, but obviously a new slate gives you the ultimate ability to separate parent and bus, from a pedestrian safety perspective, from a faculty and staff safety perspective. Those are keys when you're looking at contemporary buildings. Outdoor amenities, obviously, the reconnection with the outdoors over the last 3 years, we've learned how important those spaces are. Obviously, new buildings, we can make sure that there's a balance of that transparency in the building and that connection to nature. It's just proven, it's fact that it improves test scores, attention, focus, all of those things that Antonia spoke to. Safety and security, we did have some debate about the quality of the safety and security at one of our EOC meetings, and I think we've been a little bit convinced that you're right. I mean, I think a clean slate, you're going to obviously get all of the great things in a new building. So maybe renovated as new is a little less, just because you can't physically move programmatic elements or big portions of the building to areas where you'd like them to be in new construction. Phasing, I mentioned, right? So in a renovate as new, a phased occupied renovate as new, you're likely looking at about 4 to 5 periods, chunks, if you will, what I heard earlier, areas of renovation of the building. So think about that. You're likely moving students around the building over 4 years, 4 or 5 or 6 times, so that you can get large enough chunks of the building to renovate at once. So you're going to be moving them around, sequencing them around over a 4-year period. Core facilities, similar placement and amount. Initial cost, obviously, new is going to be a little bit more. You are paying a premium, but I'm going to bring that up as we go through a value slide. And then operating costs. We believe that we can achieve either net zero or net zero ready, whatever the community prefers, but we can achieve an incredibly efficient building, whether it be renovated as new or new. Obviously, with a compact, efficient 2-story building, your maintenance and operational costs are going to go way down. A lot on this slide. So what I want to first call out is that this slide is for renovate as new, and both cost analyses are set up in a similar way. And for those that have been following along over the last 3 years, I think you may be sick of the spreadsheets that we've been showing, but what's important is we're fair and consistent with comparing each option, right? So we're not changing. You want to analyze a renovation to a new in a fair and consistent way. So this structure is set up in a similar fashion. So at the top is your square footages, your student enrollment, obviously remains the same. In the middle is the renovation costs. These are based on, not the high end of building construction, not the low end construction, medium range construction costs based on historical averages. So we get a lot of questions about, why are these too high or too low? These are average, solid, well-built buildings, all based on our experience and experience in Connecticut and throughout New England. So these are proven numbers, absolutely proven numbers. So you have site costs, building costs, demolition costs. The green portion is a portion that's important to many, but we highlight it and break it out to make sure that people understand there is a premium to get us to that ultimate energy efficiency, that net zero building. We typically see it in systems like geothermal fields and photovoltaics, right? We've electrified our buildings quite a bit. Basically, all of our buildings over the last decade have been basically all electric for the most part. There's premiums to looking at those systems, and we've identified those. And then the last component it's a big one, but it's an important one, are soft costs, right? So think about think about it from a big picture. If you were to take the building and pull it off the ground, turn it upside down and shake it out, right? Everything that comes out of the building, the furniture, the architects, the engineers, any of the equipment, all of that stuff is called soft costs, right? It's costs that you need to pay for to deliver the project. So when we're looking at these numbers, and understandably they're large numbers, they're eye-popping numbers, but when we look at these numbers, the total project costs is everything that's needed to deliver the project, and inclusive of, and this is a big one here, and it's different on each one, and I'll show you, cost escalation, right? So cost escalation, the state wants you to escalate to the midpoint of construction for each project. Well, renovate is new, you're doing 2 years into the construction. New construction, you're only doing 1 year, right? So there's a pretty big difference when you're talking average range of about 4.5% per year on escalation. So you do all that math, you add it up, and you end up with a $110 million project for renovate is new. The state reimbursement is at 22% for a renovate is new for Weston. So we deduct that off. There's some ineligible allowance we put there to protect, the project, which is there's what's called an ineligible worksheet that the state gives us. So things like offsite, any work offsite they won't pay for. So we put that back in. So the net cost, projected net cost for a renovate is new is 88 million. New construction set up basically the same way. The big differences are there's less complications for phasing and logistics. The escalation's a bit less because it's half the time. It's a bit more when you add up all the math because of the premium to build it all new building, right? So that's the major and significant difference there in the costs. But when we analyze, and again, there's a lot of data on this, so let me walk you through this. When we have the discussion of renovations versus new construction, we really want to talk, and many of the folks tonight in the public spoke to the value, right? And this is an important piece to consider, right? So on the left-hand side, there's some areas for topics for consideration. And on the right-hand side, we have the new construction and renovate is new. So the construction cost for new building was 84. The construction cost for renovation was 78. So you had a delta when you start, yet on its surface, you say, well, yeah, renovations are cheaper. Let's do that. We're getting, let's proceed. Well, I would encourage you to think about some of the other costs that are buried in that don't stay in the building, the value that you have to invest that doesn't stay in the building. And you ask, all right, what are they? Well, when you're opening a building up that's 60 plus years old, there's going to be unforeseen conditions. So on average, the industry sees about 3 to 5% of that in renovations. And new constructions, it's far more predictable. So that delta is about at 1.8. And then there's other categories like you're paying for general conditions, you're paying for contractors to be on the site longer, so they have to pay for trailers, they have to pay for the temporary portable potties, they have to pay for all the paper, they have to pay for all the electricity. So all of those categories add up, right? So the biggest delta is the time difference, right? So you're paying more, right? Even though the construction is less, you're investing less into your building that stays there. So this value proposition, when you start really looking at, and this is pretty well proven in the industry, we validated this with all the CMRs. You're really looking at when you look at the value starts to equate itself out, and it's less than or equal to zero. So it's something to consider. It's one way of looking at it. It's not the only way, certainly, but it's one way that we think that communities like yourselves should consider when you compare renovate as new to new. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Antonia to talk about educational specifications.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And jump in at any time. So as Jeff mentioned, your educational specifications are your guidebook. This is a comprehensive couple hundred pages plus appendix to give your team, your district, and the state a sense of all of your big picture educational goals, how the program fits into that space, the items that you want to include in your school building that support those educational models that you're looking towards. It includes the mechanical systems, the site components that you would like to have. So even looking outside of your building envelope, that content is in your educational specification. How the community is going to use the space. The state wants to know about that. They want to know about all of your furniture, fixtures, and specialized equipment, including safety systems and technology. And finally, your list of educational spaces. So Jeff had shared that summary page where all of your spaces were listed out with their associated square footages. Part 6 has the detailed data that unfolds that spreadsheet and gives you a look at all of your spaces. So that's the table of contents. It also incorporates, as you can see on the far left and the far right of your screen, there's narrative sections, there's room data sheets with intense detail, space by space, and there are diagrams, not intended to be design plans, but just intended to convey in pictorial form how we're trying to narratively describe these spaces and what potential adjacencies could exist. So now what we're going to do is go through each of those 6 parts that we identified, and I'll go through just at a high level. So part 1 is where we incorporated your purpose and vision. This is a little bit of history about the FOC process, where things started, what that decision was, where we landed, our current work with the EOC and the Board of Education, the middle school philosophy, core values and beliefs, vision of a graduate. Those components are all in here, along with the strategic plan for the district as a whole and the middle school in particular. So you'll see those components in part 1. Part 2 starts to break down the projected student enrollment. This is where we talk about the demographic data, how we arrived at those 574 students. The project capacity outlines a little bit of your existing conditions and why the current building is falling short. And we also have incorporated some teacher feedback based on the existing conditions in that section. Learning and educational activities give a little bit of context to Weston as a town and the campus nature where the middle school is situated. And your overall instructional design has things like gender neutral facilities, small learning communities, all those elements on the right there, biophilic design, inclusive design, universal design for learning, as well as your sustainable and resiliency goals. Part 3 is probably the bulk of the educational specification, because this is the section where you'll find the narrative content related to all the spaces envisioned for the project, as well as those room data sheets. So lots of content here, including these diagrams, again, intended to just convey one possible adjacency relationship. And I think, yeah, that perfect. Yep. So another category here, we've had lots of conversations. I should start with with the district leadership. This was shared with faculty and staff who provided tremendous insight from big picture visioning to granular details that have been folded into this educational specification. And we came to learn through those conversations that certain programmatic adjacencies were really valuable, and that certain spaces needed to grow, certain spaces needed to shrink, or certain spaces needed to be connected to the outdoors. This is a glimpse into those room data sheets. So you'll see on the right-hand side, we've tried to stay consistent with our color coding system so that you can follow blue as classrooms, green as specialized education, and so that'll be consistent throughout the document. But most important in these room data sheets is they give another way to speak to these individual spaces within your building, touching on things like, what are the components of the door and hardware systems? What are the items on the walls? What elements are available for display? What classroom furniture is required? What are the power, data, and communications elements of these spaces. So you'll see those elements slightly change throughout each space to respond to the individual needs. Part 4 is building systems and site. What we've done in these sections is we've tried to be as specific as possible without identifying like specific manufacturers, for example, because we want this document to be able to stand the test of time and give you the flexibility to adapt as technologies and systems change. So we're describing types of systems here and not necessarily particulars, but it's comprehensive in nature, from fire protection to plumbing, HVAC, electrical, fire alarm, security, and even into that sustainability is all in here. Site components are also in this section, and though that will touch on your parking, separation of parent and bus, your athletic fields, any community gardens or school gardens, all of that, outdoor learning areas, outdoor amphitheaters for music and performances, that's all in part 4. Community uses is where we identify all of those components, from summer programs to other town organizations, PTO, BOE, general community engagement. If there's a group that wants to come in and use the gym, use the media center, use the cafeteria after school hours, we capture all of those components in community uses to just reiterate that these are buildings intended to serve the community as well as the student population. And finally is our list of educational spaces. This is that detailed breakdown. What you saw on a previous slide is to the far right hand side of your screen, that ultimate breakdown, but you'll see that we've kind of expanded each of those sections to identify exactly how many art rooms, for example, and all of the building services, especially important for facilities. We've identified all of the elements in the administrative suite. And within those small learning communities, you'll see some elements of green folded into those blue classroom areas, and that's intentional. We're trying to bring specialized education, coaching offices, resource rooms, small group and sensory rooms, in addition to those breakout spaces, into each of the learning communities, as well as providing some specialized education outside of those areas as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome job.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you.
Way to summarize 200 pages in 5 minutes. So that was
I
great.
try. Thank you.
All right. So what's next? We're home stretch here, so hang with us. We're a couple more minutes. I just want to take you through the last piece. So I mentioned June 30th every year. You submit the grant application. So what happens after that? So the state looks at it all the way up until December 15th, essentially, which what they release what's called a priority list. That priority list is released to the educational committee. From there, it goes through, I guess, what we'll call the legislative wheels, all the way through to the General Assembly. And then with any luck, the following year, so if you were to submit a grant application in 2024, in the spring of 2025 is when the legislature would take action on your grant application. From there, you can begin design, you can sit and wait, you can do many different things. So there's a lot of different options along the way during that, but that's the basic path that the grant application would travel. The superintendent spoke to the critical resolutions that the Board of Selectmen would be required. There's a lot of language here, but the language, what's important here is what you see on your screen is what the state wants to see as far as the resolutions. And they're very simple. Authorize the superintendent to submit the grant, authorize a building committee specific to this project, and then authorize the preparation of schematic design and outline specifications. What's extremely important is the design. Anything past the grant application does not have to happen until the community is comfortable, either votes on the referendum or the community is comfortable to proceed. So there's many steps, future steps in the whole design process and in this project for community engagement, stakeholder input. But what's important is these resolutions really don't affect anything from a monetary perspective until the resolution. Now, with that said, the resolution, there's two ways that you can submit the grant application: with the local funding in place, before June 30th, or if you have an annual annual fall meeting, you just need to submit, obviously, if it's a successful referendum, you need to submit that information before the 15th of November, and they'll move your project and your grant application forward at that time. So those are the critical components from the Board of Selectmen. And then obviously with the Board of Education, we need to vote on the approving the educational specifications, or that playbook for the proposed middle school project. Lastly, schedule. I really touched upon it. We've been working on the grant application quite a bit over the last couple months here, or month and a half. I mentioned that June 30th is the critical date as far as the grant application, and then you kind of wait through fall and then December 15th. So this reiterates pretty much what I went over. And with that, I will stop my screen share, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Peter, do you want to conduct the balance of this part of the meeting? Once you get off mute. That doesn't work either.
I'm back.
There you go. Thank you.
Sorry, folks. We can take Q&A from the participating Board of Ed members, although clearly the agenda was to present the Tecton presentation. And the last step of the meeting then would be to do some fine tuning on what the motion will be on our Monday night meeting. And I have that language, and I just don't have one element, which is the final price part of it. But we can move to that motion to put some granularity on what Jeff just said about the resolution. And that can be now, in a sense, it's much earlier than our typical agenda item posting. And it gives now 5 or 6 days for all of us and the public to sort of digest this and think about that motion language. And then, as said earlier, we'll take a lot of public comment on Monday. So
can I respectfully suggest, I think that there are some board members that have some questions. I just want to make sure that they are given the opportunity to ask the questions. And I want to reiterate that at the next meeting, the public can comment and other questions from the board can be asked. So, and if we want to do, raise your hand if you have a question, a sort of clarifying question about the overall project before we get into the motion language.
So are there any board members that have questions they want to ask of Tecton?
I have several.
Great. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Steve. In no particular order, the first question I have, I think it's for Tecton, but it's more process related. So the town of Weston has an ordinance 18-26. Have you seen that, Jeff? Or is anybody, Peter, are you familiar with that?
I am not, David.
What is it?
It's the building committee. We have an ordinance in town that says that in order to review that essentially the building committee will be involved prior to seeking funding for the project or selecting the architect. And I view the grant as seeking funding. So the ordinance, I'm curious how that ordinance plays into the June 30th timeline. Have we consulted the building committee in Weston?
Why don't I start, and feel free to anybody else to jump in. So it's my understanding, David, that after we proceed with our piece, that then the selectmen need to take over this process. This is all before June 30th. And one of their resolutions must be to establish a special school building. I'm reading from the language. The special school building committee. And that is what the Board of Selectmen need to do.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's read into the record because I do have some concerns that the ordinance says town agencies undertaking a building project, with the exception of highway projects duly authorized by the selectmen, will meet with this committee, referencing the building committee, in order to review the established working criteria prior to seeking funding for the project or selecting the architect. All subsequent meetings, okay.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, David,
No.
but that is correct. It's my understanding that when the Board of Selectmen move into their phase, you know, they have several resolutions. One of them includes a building committee specifically for the project. And then as part of that, and again, you know, this is at the more of the selectmen level, that there are very certain components, both with the Board of Ed further down the road in the selectmen, that do things that there has to be an architect selection committee. There have to be people on this committee to review it. There are many of those other steps, but that takes place a little bit later. Right now, the charge would be to the selectmen, you know, here are the things that you need to do if you wish to move forward. And one of them has to be to establish this committee. And I believe the purpose of this committee is to help oversee that work.
Okay, I will, I'll defer to the Board of Selectmen on that reading of the ordinance, because I do have some concerns that with the June 30th date, and that ordinance would imply to me that the building committee, which we have a standing committee in Weston, needs to be involved, and that's why I was directing the question a bit to Jeff, is has he consulted with them? If it's not a requirement, but it sounds like it's a bit of an unknown at the moment.
Yeah, to answer it from, I guess, our perspective, as luck would have it, the whole selection process has to happen by state statute all over again. So as part of that grant, there's a commitment for architectural designer services, for owner's project management services, and for the whatever builder you're going to do. Those all have to be governed by the building committee appointed. Yep.
Okay. Another question we had was, I'm sorry, Lisa.
Wait, can I just clarify one thing, David, that you said? So it's our understanding, and we got this understanding actually from our, you know, Shipman and Goodman. There's someone in the firm that makes sure that we are doing this in the proper order. And what was shared with us was that the establishment of a building committee must be specific to this project. It is not the existing building committee.
Right.
Maybe there's members on it. That's a decision for the selectmen, but there is a separate building committee established for this project.
Okay, and I don't know that particular, but my concern is that it mentions a building committee prior to seeking funding. And I think that there needs to really be flushed out before June 30th, because I believe an interpretation, a very clear interpretation, is we're asking for state funding. That's the purpose of the grant. So okay, I think that we probably discussed that enough. My next question is, somebody mentioned, or I think two people may have mentioned, the educational impact on these kids, but I wasn't sure from a timing perspective. Jeff, if the timeline that you showed us stays somewhat accurate, am I correct in that by December, the state will respond with some affirmative, some numbers, some reimbursement?
So they'll issue a priority list, what's called a priority list, and that will list out all the accepted grant applicants. And they list them in, typically they list them in priority A, B, and C. So there's a list that goes then to the legislation, and it's part of the annual, review. And typically in the spring session, they approve that priority list. Once that priority list is approved in the spring session, that means that you then have an approved grant application. The only thing you shouldn't do before that is start construction.
Okay, So
make
just,
sense?
so would we, I guess my question may be an easier one to ask. When is the earliest that, what, when's the earliest that we would have a referendum? And then based on the referendum, when would the construction start? If all
Sure.
things were equal, there's no
Yeah.
known delays and stuff like that. When
Yeah.
when would we have the referendum and when would construction begin?
Yeah, if you want to submit a grant, if you want to submit a grant application this June for June 2024, you have to have the referendum results into the state prior to November 15th of 2024. So before that, from a referendum perspective, whatever date you want. Then the design of a new middle school would typically take 12 to 14 months to get approval. You know, to design, get all the necessary local approvals, those kinds of things. So you're likely not starting construction until the end of 2025, somewhere in that range.
So I make, as I get information, I make notes to myself.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
I think we had presented kind of an overall milestone schedule. I can look while you ask your other questions.
Okay. I mean, the reason I ask this question is because it's the impact to the students. I'm not, my concern is that if we start construction in spring of 2025, which I think we reasonably can say more likely would be fall of 2026, because I've worked in public schools. I know that projects like this, you focus on spring, but summer after the kids have left is when you really gear up. And once you shut down for construction, you know, June 1st, you're shut down, right? So really, I think we can probably say the impact would be would be fall 2026. So my concern is that if we do that, my math is the current third graders, and Patty, and definitely Patty checked me on this, on my math, and maybe Dan as well. Current third graders, current second graders, and that's it if things go smooth, but let's just say it's 2.5 years. So if current third graders, current second graders, and current first graders, the kids who have been most impacted by the COVID shutdown will not have a natural or standard middle school. They will be where during those really awkward puberty, getting to know myself, those same kids. Is it the basis of my question is, are we doing a disservice to the same group of kids that have been so much displaced by COVID? And should we not wait a year or two so that we can let these kids go through and get to high school and not put them in portables or shoehorn them into WIS? And that was my next question was, I didn't hear where you're going to put these kids for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's precise. I mean, so all of your thoughts are similar and parallel thoughts to all the working groups and the comments and the discussions that we had. And that's precisely why, in my opinion, we landed on a new construction. And the reason why we landed on new construction, let me pull this back up, just maybe I wasn't clear. I guess I should have been more clear. I apologize. Let me see. So can you see that site plan? Okay.
Yep.
Let me just enlarge it a little bit. There we go. So the strategy would be and obviously it's not going to be exactly the shape. The strategy would be to limit disruption as best as possible to the existing occupants of the middle school. And we've done this. I think Colchester is probably the best example. We built a new building 20 feet away from the existing building, put up a fence, put up a wall, sound attenuation. So we limited disruption of the new construction. So the day-to-day experience for the students is far less in a new construction than it would be in an occupied phase renovation. Because an occupied phase renovation, you would likely take like if you can see my cursor, right? Can you? Yeah. You would likely take, a portion like this, renovate it for 8 to 10 months, put the students in there, then go over and take, this chunk down here, renovate that. So you're talking 4 or 5 times of that. That is ultimate disruption, and that is painful to live through, and talk to anybody that's lived through it. So those discussions compared to, geez, is there enough room? Is it possible to get a very compact, efficient 2-story building? Understandably, we're affecting the fields, got it. But can we get it in here and limit disruption to the students? Because totally agree with you, David, that it's been difficult for all those children during the last 3 to 4 years. But can we build a building in here and limit disruption? And then when we're done building that building, you tear this down, you put the field over there. Does it make more sense to have all your fields kind of concurrent together with Revson and those kinds? Does it ultimately? I think it's a better solution, to be quite honest with you. And I think it definitely is going to limit the disruption to those students, faculty, and staff, like everybody involved with the school. The community as well. So, and I think that the ultimate benefit also is that, for those challenges, and we heard this at the, 2 years ago when we were looking at, geez, what to do with the pool. How can we separate that out so the community can use it maybe during the day, right? So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I figured I'd try to tackle it that way.
Actually, Jeff, that was really helpful. So, which I didn't know, just check me on this one. The intent is to build the new middle school with little to no hopeful disruption to the existing school. Then once the new middle school, or whatever the timing is ready for operation, at that point, the kids go into the new middle school and the old middle school is
Absolutely.
then demolished. So
Yep.
there is no plans to put our students into portables.
No, this, you're not land rich here with this campus, but I think there's enough there to do this and end up with a really good solution when you're, completely finished. And honestly, I mean, there's going to have to be, you're going to have to get construction in and out and those kinds of things. There's going to be disruption, but compared to a phased occupied renovation, it's not even comparable. And I don't, we've tried to show you that value slide. I don't know how you really put a price on disruption, because I mean, I don't live with it, be a parent,
Yeah, I mean, we have and we are,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
think that from what you've said, up to this point and in today's meeting, one of the common questions has been, how do you not disrupt these kids even further?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think your answer is building new. We bring up, and the plan is to bring up that new building while not really, for the most part, disrupting the current middle school. So the third, second, and first graders, maybe the first graders, but while today's third and second graders won't necessarily enjoy the new middle school,
Yeah.
they will have an experience in a middle school, not in portable classrooms, not shoehorned into WIS or some other crazy concoction.
Yep. And
Okay. All right. And my last two questions
Yep.
are, I know that you've been involved in town for a really long time. Has there been any consideration? In 2017, I had read the study. I believe it was Silver and Petrocelli, not you. Basically said there was about $30 million of renovations known to be required at Hurlbut, WIS, and the high school. And then I think I was on FOC with you. I think it was not looked at during FOC, but then we had the STEAM town something or another, which
Yep.
you were involved with. Yeah. The gray hair is partially getting old and being on the board for a while.
No
but,
hair here, so I
right?
hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So I guess my question, to cut to the chase, is you've been involved a really long time. We're looking at $111 million, potentially 22% reimbursement, so 88 million, 86 million. What about the cost to bring the other three schools on par with where they should be today? Because I think we want to not find ourselves in 20 years from now, and I don't think any of us will be on this call in 20 years, but who knows? But in 20 years from now, talking about how we neglected Hurlbut or WIS or the high school at the expense of the middle school, because we have neglected the middle school at the expense, arguably, of the other three schools. And one would even argue we've just plain neglected the middle school and neglected Hurlbut.
Yeah. So most of our work during the FOC was about optimization, square footages, really analyzing, are you using every square inch you possibly can? It was, it was less about necessarily the conditions assessment, because that was done correct by another firm previous to us. I guess my answer to that would be, and we've done this often so it's a combination, typically in communities, it's a combination of a major capital project with strategic investments in other buildings to make sure that you're not finding yourself in this position. And those strategic investments, what's a little bit challenging sometimes for boards of education is they might not be focused on programmatic. They're more focused on building envelope, more focused on kind of the condition, preserving the asset rather than transforming what's inside. So I guess my short answer to it is I there's a way, because every community does it, to layer in the capital project with these strategic investments to preserve. And I would say you're going to have to prioritize, and we know Hurlbut probably needs a little bit more than some of the others. But I think some more work, and it's probably continual work, needs to be done to identify those and prioritize those, so that you can layer them in. And I will say that there are other opportunities, like, so the state is looking at just like HVAC grants, and there's other avenues now with energy efficiency projects to see if you can improve your buildings and preserve them rather than just paying 100% out of pocket. So I it's definitely totally hear you that you can't just do this and forget about everything else, but I do think you have to layer it and you have to be strategic, and that would be our recommendation to it. It's possible, for sure.
Okay, so then, and I'll get to my last question. Will we as a community because I don't think it's directly a Board of Ed question, but are we as a community going to find out before we're asked to vote on a referendum about the middle school, are we going to have numbers to understand what type of strategic work should be done at Hurlbut? Because I think we as a board owe the community what the next 20 years looks like. And we're singularly focused right now on the middle school, but we have a responsibility to Hurlbut, to Weston, to the high school. And I think we have to promise the community that before we go to a referendum on 86 or 88 million, we know Hurlbut needs X million, West needs Y million, and the high school needs Z million. What is the total? Is that something we're going to have an answer for? But I'm kind of looking at you, Lisa. Is that?
Yeah, David, because frankly, when you and I spoke, and you were like, remember that study that happened? We had a conversation about it. So Mike Del Mastro, Phil, and I went and pulled out all the studies, because I think it's important. Look, there's been a lot of money, quite frankly, spent on consulting and studies over the years. And we want to go back and look at those studies, look at those needs, look what they say. And we pulled the documents. Mike Del Mastro, Phil, and I sat down to look specifically at, there was this option for Hurlbut if we need to do this, or this option. Then there was pricing. And I know that part of our conversations with Mr. Cross and Mr. Del Mastro that we had was, I'm very aware that there's other work that has to be done. How do we accomplish that other work? One of the first questions we had was, well, the elementary school needs work too. We were told, no, it's one project at a time. Meanwhile, like Jeff said, you have to mitigate what's going on in the other buildings and slowly work at addressing issues. So, and I apologize if I'm being long-winded, but we did have numbers, and I'm looking at some of the original drafts where it said, one of the options could be, and it was, I don't know, a certain amount at Hurlbut, the different options. And we had quotes on money. Let's say it was $9 million to do this. Now we have to translate that into, quite frankly, what would the number be in 2024, 2025, after COVID, materials and all that. And we have reached out to get some understanding of that and what it would cost. I know that we do have priority lists. Perhaps, Mr. Del Mastro, if you'd like to add any light to that, because you are kind of helping me go through, because we do need to have a sense, people need to know in the town, what is the scope of work that has to be done, not only on this campus, but also in this town. And that's where the Board of Selectmen, and we need to collaborate on that. Mike, I wanted to give you a chance to respond or shed some light on that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, there's quite a few things. And hopefully with the firm that's coming up with our numbers, we can actually see light of what needs to be done. Certainly the North House, certainly elementary school, just design, HVAC. I know we would like to mirror D-wing with E-wing of the high school, which would be the architectural windows, new cabinetry, heating, cooling upgrade. So there are quite a few projects that are on the table that would be coming through. And as soon as we can get some updated pricing, we could move forward with it for the study of it. We do have some money put aside to actually get a firm in here to give us an idea of what we need to do to the North House and to part of the high school. But yeah, there's some projects that are on that table that need to be addressed in the other schools.
And it's not a unilateral decision on our part. I mean, the town has capital projects that they're planning, and it all then goes back to the Board of Finance to tell the town, how they're, what their comfort in how all these projects are going to be financed.
Sorry,
I think that's really important that we have a comprehensive. We as the Board of Education can only control the educational aspect of it, right? So for us, I think it's important for us to have some sort of a map in place of, here are the things that need to happen with our facilities, and here are our priorities, and here's kind of a timeline that we're looking to address things. The first thing being the middle school, and putting in place a timeline of things to be, and it could be across 10 years, 20 years. I just think that we need to have a plan in place so people see that we're not just kicking things down the road. We're approaching it in a very systematic way and very mindful of the cost to the community. But I think that also goes hand in hand with the Board of Selectmen putting together a complete, like to your point, Lisa, a complete town plan too, because things are going to be changing in the town, and we need to see how that's all going to fit together. And ultimately, it's all going to be paid for by the taxpayers. And so I think the Board of Finance is kind of on the hook, and they need to come out and say, we've got work that we need to do in this town. That's normal. We've got some major programs that we need to do in this town. Here is what you taxpayers are going to be looking at as far as your, tax burden in order for us to address these issues. And I'm not even sure right now where we are. I think our bond may have expired from WIS this year. I'm not sure. David's saying yes. So, you have a lot of people who are very sensitive to that, who were here when the bond was first put in place for WIS, and who are very much looking forward to the bond expiring and looking forward to getting some sort of a tax cut. And now we're basically coming back to them and saying, well, 20 years ago, we built a school. Now we need to build another one. And that's just realistic too, because the middle school is definitely old and it has to be addressed. But I just think that we have to communicate with the town and make sure that they are on board with these things, and that they understand that there is a comprehensive plan in place, and they're not going to get surprise, another bond, surprise, another bond. So I think that that's really important, that we work with both the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to ensure that communication goes out to the public. So that's that. David, if you're done asking questions, I have
one very last question. So I've spoken to other Board of Ed members, and this might be definitely in Tina's court, but I'm going to approach it to Jeff. Tina knows I have a love for vocational. I was told that the state of Connecticut is currently giving more money or a slightly different reimbursement rate or higher reimbursement rate. Don't quote me on that, but it was definitely tied to something that Governor Lamont, I believe, was spearheading relative to vocational types of classrooms, where if you brought some level of vocational trade, and I'm not talking necessarily about arc welding, but what would be vocational in 2024. I can get some detail more. I can go back to that person to get more details. But have you heard anything like that, Jeff, where there is a higher reimbursement? Maybe it's just on the per square foot of that specialized classroom or lab. Have you heard about that?
In this past session, they approved this? Is that?
I believe, so the person I'm speaking to, I believe, is in a town that's currently, they haven't broken ground, but I think they're further along. They're in the grant process right now, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, career technical education components. I'm not familiar with this. I know they changed some of this past session, they mandated that you needed now to carry 10% contingencies. I didn't see anything on the CTE but I'll take another pass at it as far as the vocational. Certainly if there's percentage bonus percent increases, we would definitely pursue them. I think there's some components in this school that would be applicable to it as it stands today in the educational specification. And certainly we're seeing it in our work too, making sure that they're really it's more interdisciplinary focused and more project based, and which folds in the whole CTE kind of mindset, which is yes, that's definitely where it's headed for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
More like 2024 vocation, not, I don't think they're gonna pay for an arc welder to come
Right.
in.
Yeah.
But what I understood it was, yeah.
Come on, Dan, you want an arc welder in your school, don't you?
Why mount the TV to the wall if you can arc weld it to the wall?
Sharon, do you have questions? Or David, are you?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Sharon?
Yeah, so one of the questions, let's see, some of it was already answered with David's questions. So we do have to have a vote, a community vote prior to, and we have to have the results of the state, you said, by November 15th. So that's kind of key. The other thing was the specifics of the design. So I'm a little confused on the specifics of the design. I wasn't quite sure. I put in here, will they be after approval by the state or by the Board of Selectmen? If it's after, when the Board of Selectmen were to vote on a design, are we locked into that one design, or what sort of flexibility do we have?
Yeah, that's a great question, and sorry I wasn't more clear, but this grant application is kind of like a space proofing test fit. It's the educational specification is describing the framework and everything that you want in your building. It's not about design. It's the state isn't going to approve, a particular layout. And what we need to do is make sure we validate the program and the costs associated with the building of that size. The design, there's three major phases in the design, and I'll bring up a schedule that I was looking for before, but the design of the project is still to come. What we talked about mostly in the ed spec is everything that we want in the building and the adjacency relationships between the program components, but not about what it looks like from a planimetric or aesthetic perspective. So it's a great question. All of that process, to be quite honest with you, that design time is that 14 to 16 months that I was referring to. There's three phases: the schematic design phase, which is like big picture, talking of, showing, multiple different plan layouts, site planning, building planning, multiple different ways the building can look from an aesthetic perspective. That all happens in schematic design. And then in design development, really, what you really want to do is approve in schematic design, kind of the general look and feel and shape. Then you go into design development, and then you talk about every room. You go into every room and talk about what it looks like, what it feels like, what you need in there, soup to nuts. And then the last phase of the design is what's called construction documents, which is the biggest part, which is kind of, for us, it's heads down, putting all the details together. So story short, there's a whole year ahead of you from a design perspective, community engagement, stakeholder involvement, teacher, faculty, student, all that kind of stuff. So plenty left.
Okay, so with that being said, as we move forward and we're talking about that voter referendum that has to take place in November, that is to, and this is just for clarification to everybody, that is to show the state that the community is committed to basically floating a bond to cover our portion of it. When we have that referendum, that amount has to be set, correct?
Correct.
For the referendum.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a difficult like chicken and egg scenario because we're saying we're going to do this. We're assuming we're going to get the max, right? Or we do it assuming we're going to get the minimum. How do we handle that?
So the only variable in the reimbursement rate that we had shown is, so there's a delta between a 10% difference in reimbursement rate between renovate as new and new construction. So everything out, so the state's not going to come back and say, we're only going to reimburse you for 50% of your building. That they won't do that. They'll say, here's your reimbursement rate. Your building is at or below the allowable area. That's what they're going to check. That's why we're so focused on making sure that when we program out the building, it's at or below the allowable area that the state is going to be looking for. So
it's not a question of if, it's a question of how much reimbursement we get.
yeah, what my suggestion is, you make a compelling argument that new construction has, and there's I think it's 1085. There's a section in the state statute. It's CGS 10285A, where if you can make a compelling argument that a new construction is as economical, I'm paraphrasing a bit, to renovation, then you're entitled to the increased reimbursement. And this happened, we're working on a project in Madison where it's a new elementary where they're kind of consolidating two elementaries somewhat, and they received like a letter from the state after they review it. They received the increased 10% reimbursement because that new construction, even though it was new, it was more economical than going back and trying to renovate everything. So that would be my strong suggestion, to do that. Regardless, to answer your question, on the value that the community has to vote, the value that the community has to vote is for the total project costs, and it can have, so if it's the 110 less the reimbursement from the state, that's what the state is looking for, a financial commitment from the community on the project. So
the referendum would be for 88, not for 110.
No, the referendum would be for 110 less state reimbursement.
Okay, so we would have to, I mean, all right, so
there's ways you can word it. I'm sure there's counsel that can help you with that, but you can write it in that the total project cost is 110, and there's ways to write it in so people can get comfortable with that reimbursement coming back from the state. And keep in mind, you don't have to spend anything else other than submitting the grant, the costs associated with submitting the grant application, until you hear next spring. So you don't have to, and even then you don't have to move forward. You have 2 years to put a shovel in the ground once you get the approval of the grant. So I think that's important for the community to understand. And then
if the specs of the school are to change at all, if we make it smaller or bigger or anything like
Sure.
that after we submit the grant, does that affect the grant?
No, you're entitled. It's EDO 49R. So you're entitled to, and typically you do that at the end of a project, because these projects typically last, 4 to 5 years. So you're entitled to modify essentially the grant, your program, your ed spec once. And our recommendation typically is you go through the project, because things are going to change, technology happens, things evolve, and then you modify it at the end, and you're allowed, to make sure that you capture everything from a reimbursement perspective. So there's that one safety valve that is typically we wait until the end to do it, and that is worked successfully in the past.
Okay. That's what I have here. So
Can I just, on Sharon's question, does the town have an out? I understand what you're saying, which is that, $111 million, 86 million is what the net number should be after reimbursement. There's no guarantee, when we go to referendum, do we have a promissory note or something from the state? Okay, so if the town has to approve 111 million and they're thinking or anticipating a reimbursement of 22%, and for whatever reason, the state comes back and says, we'll give you 20% or 18% or 12%, is the community at that point on the hook because they approved? Okay.
No, you don't have to. I mean, even if you have an approved grant application, things change. I don't know, maybe you want to do a different building, the next year. You don't have to proceed with that grant application. It's nice that you have it, and you have the state commitment saying that this is what we'll reimburse you for, but you don't have to proceed. You have 2 years after you get that letter from the state to build if you want. And so there's plenty of, you're not locking anybody in. You don't have to do it. All you lose is some of the costs associated with the grant application.
So it's like a dual commitment, the commitment from the town that the town will fund it, and a commitment from the state that they will reimburse some dollar amount. And even at that point, if it turns out the dollar amount's too low, something changes drastically in the town tax rolls, whatever the case may be, there's an off ramp.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's definitely an off ramp. And just real quick, because I want to share one thing. Sorry, I won't belabor it, but I just wanted to speak to the process because I think this might be helpful to people to put it in perspective. That this is you're talking about 4 to 5 years. So we're right here, right over on the change pointer. We're over here, right? So let's say you hear, you can start. You're going to hear somewhere in this range in May, June next year about an approved grant. You can start the design early if you want. You got to go through all the whole process. But if you were to start it a little bit early, and it takes 16 to 18 months, and this is to your point, David, earlier, if we plan it correctly, we finish the design, we bid it out, you level it, you get everybody ready to go, get all your submittals. When school is out, right? You're going to want to start right when school's out, or maybe even a little bit, get everybody ready to go. Then if you start, you can likely finish to open the new building there, right? So you're really, and you're affecting like almost a years of educational life, of a year of education. But if you plan it correctly, you could limit the disruption with a new build. And then obviously you gotta tear it down, after you build it. But that's minimal disruption, right? Compared to they're already in a new building. So just from a timing perspective, I think this is helpful. If you can time that appropriately, then even though this is going to take 18 to 20 months, you're really only affecting one school year, right? So I just wanted to share that. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks.
Sure.
Other questions from the board?
I was going to wrap up and then ask the superintendent for our next step in this meeting. I just want to take a minute because I thought that David and Martin earlier asked a really good question, sort of what's the long-term plan? And we actually have addressed this in the Educational Optimization Committee. We do have a vision, and in that vision, it shows how all the jigsaw pieces of the entirety of the campus fit together. And it took a lot of consideration to sort of move all the pieces around. And one of the pieces that we were looking at was green schools and healthy buildings. And Jeff talked about this as one of his line items. And it's actually not only relevant to 21st century learning and construction, but it has financial implications. And what we've learned in the EOC, and this was presented, was that through the Inflation Reduction Act, you actually get quite substantial money back from the federal government, the greener and healthier you make your buildings. It's quite a remarkable positive cycle. So when we look at, and I wanted to address Sharon here, when we look at how we basically fund the layer, right? You actually leverage the money that you get back making geothermal at the middle school, and that gives you the ability to do greening and healthier buildings at Hess. Then you get that money and you can use part of that money to work on the high school's HVAC. So the more we're cognizant, the more we're disciplined about green and healthy schools, the more we actually save money and apply it to the next school. It's a really good sort of domino effect. And the last little minor point, but I think this is a good point. Again, Dave, you brought up a good point about vocational training. That is addressed in this vision plan. But here's a little food for thought. It turns out through my relationships globally now in the green building space, in the green school space, there's buildings that are teaching kids. They use the building dynamics, actually sensors or HVAC or other electrical or mechanical system that teach the kids, which is remarkable. So we'll have a generation of attentive kids that may want to go into the trades, and they'll actually learn their trade as they basically walk the hallways of their school. So it's a sort of an exciting time. I just wanted to add that because I want to inculcate that we're sort of on the cusp of much bigger things when we pay attention to green schools and healthy buildings. With that last statement, I was going to ask the superintendent, would you like me to proceed with the language that we'll use in our motion on Monday, or do you think that Tecton covered it to a substantial amount? Because that was my last action item for this meeting.
I just have a couple clarifying questions for the board.
Okay.
And yes, I think that it is important that the motion language is, at least read in anticipation that you kind of understand where this is headed. And it also needs to be posted in the next agenda in May. And for Monday, we can do both. But I know that in speaking to both Jeff and Antonia, they wanted to make sure that on Monday, it's really important that people's questions are answered and that there is no other piece that they would like clarified, if you will. On Monday, we will have time for the public to comment, and we can, again, if necessary, have a brief discussion. I know there are two board members that are not here. Jeff and Antonia are very willing to come on Monday. It is an in-person meeting. I just want to make sure that we are prepared, especially logistically and document-wise, if we need to post anything or have anything else that that the board would deem important prior to the motion, if I'm making myself clear.
Is the plan for Monday? My concern with Monday is, and Sharon actually, I think, did some research. So, Sharon, you own this if it's right, and you own it if it's wrong. But Sharon mentioned that public comment at our Board of Ed meetings is limited to 20 minutes on a topic. One would presume the topic is this topic, the middle school. And we don't respond to public comment. So should we be calling a public comment, or should it be some sort of interactive discussion? Because we have not had any interactive conversation. We're limited to 20 minutes. And I saw at least 2 hands up that did not have an opportunity to speak tonight.
Well, let's clarify. Ms. Saketa, was there anyone that did not get to speak?
There were, once we hit the 20-minute mark and Peter started talking, there were 2 other individuals that did have their hands raised. People kept going.
Okay, well, what I would respectfully suggest, according to the bylaws, we need to follow the bylaws, and they do not call for a public discussion back and forth. So what I would respectfully suggest is, and we can certainly communicate this out, and the board can, that if any member of the public, there is another opportunity prior to the vote to speak at the meeting, but also the public should be encouraged to email the Board of Ed members with, I would like, could you please bring up this during the board discussion to get clarity for them? That is kind of getting at what you're talking about, David, without, quite frankly, violating bylaws. And if we were going to change those bylaws and say, well, no, we want to have an interactive discussion, there is a whole process within the bylaws about how you would have to go about changing the bylaws that would
Right,
not
but we
be
could,
accomplished like that.
yeah, but time constraints aside, from Monday, we could, as a Board of Ed, schedule a meeting just on this topic and make an interactive meeting, right?
No, not according to the bylaws.
So the Board of Ed's
That was kind
unable,
of the point of us having these two meetings, and to encourage the public to listen, to reach out to individual board members. That's my understanding. Mr. Aziz?
No, that's my understanding as well. Plus, before we get to the point of having a referendum, there will be more public meetings. I mean, there will be more discussions about this. And my guess is there'll be the opportunity for the public to ask questions and have them responded to. And certainly they should submit their questions, and hopefully we can respond to them in writing.
okay, so the way the Board of Ed is set up, we are unable to schedule a meeting that's purely intent to be interactive.
That is my understanding, yes, according to
Yeah.
our bylaws. There's strict guidelines around public comment. This isn't a workshop, this is the meeting. That's why we made sure we had a special meeting where we presented, Tecton again presented, people could ask questions. We can have the board members ask more questions on Monday, and then the motions would take place. And if the public wishes to reach out to you, to the board and say, these are areas that we would like to be discussed amongst the board, then they are more than, able to do so. And I guess the only thing I would add is that your function here as the board is to either pass the resolution, not pass the resolution. Then it's turned into the hands of the Board of Selectmen, where there will be other opportunities to discuss. It has to involve finance, and then ultimately the referendum, if they choose to proceed.
Is it possible? This sounds like a strange thing, and I understand, Lisa, exactly what you're saying, that our role is to move this down the pipeline. But to David's point, and I think that community involvement is going to be really important here as we go to the community and we ask them for $111 million bond for them to be passed, for us to ask that in a referendum. Do you have any understanding, or is there anything holding us back from having a town meeting that would have a representative from the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Ed there who are able to answer questions to the public as they have them? Of course, I mean, we want to be as interactive as ask as many questions as people said, but I just think that this is a big ask. I think I think getting community buy-in is a really important thing if we're going to ask for this kind of money.
But absolutely. I think the key here, though, is that it's the Board of Selectmen that has the authorization power to move this project forward.
That's right.
Our function is just to either pass or not support the motion. Then the Board of Selectmen, it is at their level that they need to engage all of that. Clearly we'll be a part of it. I'm happy to answer questions, but it's the Board of Selection that has to authorize the continuation of this project.
And don't forget the conversations, that David brought up and you brought up, Sharon, and Jeff has answered.
Yeah.
Nothing is binding here. We're just wanting to go to the next step. And the next step, this is to Jeff's timeline. We're not binding the town to do anything. We're just trying to move this forward.
We're just trying to move this forward, but we all have to be in agreement that what we're moving forward is, in our opinion, the best solution for the school system. That's where our job as a board member is. So that's what our vote on Monday is going to be about, whether or not we truly believe that this is the best solution for the school system moving forward, which I'm totally fine with. I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity for the public to be heard beyond even the school board when it goes to, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and before this referendum happens. Because I got to be honest with you, I think most people right now, if you said to them, putting out a referendum, $111 million, go vote, it would be like right. And so we need to make sure that this is collaborative with the community and that everyone understands we're not just out here looking for expensive, flashy buildings by any stretch of imagination. We have, there are criteria that the current buildings are not meeting as far as our students are concerned that we need to address in order to, maintain the level of education and the level of ranking and things that our schools enjoy. So I just think it's super important to be as collaborative with the community as possible. So
Correct.
that's my
But
sense.
it's the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to call the town meetings, to talk to finance and all of that. That's
all right. Hopefully they're listening.
Yeah, no, I know they are. They were coming. So hello.
I would just ask that ahead of my ability to cast a vote on this, I would like to have a rough number of the amount of money to get Hess, West, and the high school to where we want it to be. Because I think we have to look at this as we can't wait 20 years. So if we do bond or we do 111 million or 88 million for the middle school, it's just a matter of a year or two before we go back and ask for money for the other schools. So I'm not saying I need it down to the penny, but for me to cast a vote, I would need some information as to where we are today on expected out-of-pocket costs for the other three schools.
So just to make sure that we provide you with the correct information that you need, and I would ask Mr. Del Mastro, and I know Mr. Cross will work on that. What we would do is we would take the feasibility studies, the numbers from 2017 and translate them into 2024 dollars, if you will. Mr. Del Mastro, that's what you and Mr. Cross were working on, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Lisa.
So I know Mr. Cross, you were working on it as well. Do you think that we would have rough, we're not going to have it as David said to the penny, but Phil, would we be able to have a sense of these? We definitely have what the feasibility and what has to be done, but would we have a rough estimate of what that would transfer for Monday?
I would have to check. I can't say definitively that we will have it. But I think we have to remember that if we have to think about what are we trying to do with the other schools. If we're trying to upkeep those schools, then the cost may not necessarily be a cost that all has to be an upfront cost. It may be a cost that may be spread over several years. So we can do our best to outline for you over several years what that cost could potentially be, because I think it'll be difficult to say, hey, we need to spend another 100 million on these two schools in the next year or so. So we'll try to phase that out in a prioritized way and try to get that from Monday.
Yeah, I think what Lisa said is, I think a reasonable way of going about it, unless there was something on that 2017 list that has been done, which I don't believe. I think that was pretty much a capital big ticket items, and I don't think any of them really have been done. So I think it would be an honest attempt if we took that, and I believe it was about 30 million in 2017. But I think it would be an honest attempt for the community if we took that number, or whatever that number is perceived to be, and then adjusted it for what it would cost in 2024. I think that would be, for my purposes, I think that would be a fair way to say this is about what we need.
We need to go back and look at the FOC study. It's been a few years. It's in there.
The one thing I have to say is that, David, I don't disagree. I think I would love to see those numbers as well, but I would also love to see the numbers as they were initially proposed, because I think that the town needs to be aware of both numbers so that they understand that waiting is expensive. So there's going to be a cost if we wait too long to address a lot of these things as well, right? So I think it's a good idea to get both of those numbers. If you could share them with us, and of course it'd be part of the agenda or whatever it is that the town, the people have the ability to see, what it was in 2017 versus what it is today. and what the cost difference is.
Well, what we can definitely do is share the original 2017 numbers. And
Right.
I think that's a good starting place. And we will do our very best to have that translated into 2024 numbers. I can't guarantee we'll have them all for Monday, but at least it gives people a ballpark of this is the price to do. Now, some of these things are just basic capital projects. But I think at least putting it out there to kind of provide as much information as possible of what we were facing in 2017 and how those capital projects could turn into, the capital budget, which again is controlled by the town, not us. We can certainly provide that information as a point of reflection and see with our consultants if we can get rough ballpark numbers of how that translates into 2024.
But just remember, and I'm making this number up, let's assume that the number for the balance of the schools is $50 million. The Board of Finance can come back and tell us, no, the town doesn't have the ability to bond an incremental $50 million near term. And so we still have to prioritize what we think the greatest need is at the moment, at this moment. And that's the decision we're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's spot on, Steve. That's 100% right. If again, made up number 50 million, which 30 million in 2017 could be 50 today.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. That's what we're asking the community is at the end of the for me for Monday anyway, to have a feel good about a vote. I'd like to know the totality of what we are going to potentially ask the community for in the next 5 years. And then, like you said, Steve, they'll have to make some decisions, and maybe they only are willing to afford 80 million. And then we as a board or the town or whomever has to say, okay, the community is willing to do 80 million. How do we stretch that across the 4 schools?
That's a very different conversation than the one we're having now.
So for Monday, we will pull together as soon as possible the original, I forget what the document is called, but Mike and Phil know what it is. The original work that needs to be done in the other schools. Some of them were different options. So we have a sense of the scope of the work, to speak to, all right, these were what was recommended. These are the real high priority things that need to be done to keep things going, if you will. And this is a 2017 number. We may not have the 2024, but at least you have a sense of the scope of what needs to be tackled. So we can certainly do that. I think I'm hearing that I think it would be helpful to have Jeff and Antonia there in person if there are any other clarifying questions for the board. Is that correct?
I think that would be helpful because Michael and Chad weren't here.
Exactly.
Couldn't be here tonight.
Okay, and so
I
it's
agree.
7 p.m. in person, and then excuse me, it's a regular board meeting. We will front load this to the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you.
And then the other thing is I do think it's important, there will be these motions on Monday. And again, I've said from the very beginning, I respect everyone's viewpoints, their feedback. This is a big decision. You vote, you abstain, you vote for, you vote against, whatever. And then we're done and it has to go to the selectmen, and we are committed to collaborating with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to make sure that the public has a sense of this project. Would it be helpful if Peter at least read the draft resolutions that will be, published in the agenda so the board members kind of have a sense of what they are? Should we just post it?
I just posted. It's a long, who's going to remember it? But why don't we just post it so we can read it and study it, and if there are questions, we can ask questions.
Then maybe I just say the summary of them, okay? So there's 3 parts. You recommend that the town governing bodies proceed with the project, that you recommend applying for this grant if the selectmen authorize it. That's their job. And then you approve the ed specifications, specifically that Tecton presented on the conceptual idea of the new school. So those are the 3 things. right? To recommend that the town governing bodies proceed, like ask them to proceed, basically. Recommend that we apply if the selectmen authorize it, and they may not, and then that we approve the ed specs that Tecton presented. And again, none of that commits us to just taking it to the next level, which is frankly at the town. And with the selectmen, and then they will have to, their responsibility is to go through what they need to do, involve the selectmen, involve the public in the way that they seem fit. So I will make sure that the language is posted in the agenda, and we will get the other question about the scope of the work for Monday. Does that sound good?
It's okay
Yeah,
with me.
sounds good. Yeah.
I want, if anyone thinks of anything, okay, and I can, oh, hi. If if anyone thinks of anything between now and then, or if anyone hears from a constituent or Monday, the board member is more than, as you know, you can certainly ask that question. And if I can be of any assistance with any of this, please email me and I will do my very best to provide you what you need.
I do have one last question for Jeff. Sorry, and then I'll be done. Jeff, I think you mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it. The projections, the cost projections that you utilized were not high, not low, but mid, right?
That is
Middle
correct.
range.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure of that. All right. I'm done.
So I guess it's time to land this plane, right? Thank you for flying our flight tonight. And I think we'll have a motion for adjournment, and then we'll look forward to seeing the agenda for Monday.
Also move that we adjourn this lovely meeting. Steve,
Thank
you're
you.
muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
Steve's got his
I'm
oxygen.
sorry. My signal kept going in and out. The meeting is at 7? Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure of that.
All
Great.
right.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I already did that. Got a second?
Sorry, second?
Please.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
evening.
Thanks, Jeff.